Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today I have both a new company that I have never reviewed before and a new product type that I have never reviewed before to share with you. Burson V7 series operational amplifiers, or OpAmps. So we have both the classics and the Vivids here. A single unit of each of these will set you back $89 from your bank account, and if you buy a pair of them, you are charged $169 for a pair of them. Burson sent these to me back in the fall of 2024. It's been a while that I've had these in here because it takes a while to evaluate something like this. But other than sending these to me, they have made no attempt to influence my opinion on these in any way, and they have been very patient with me to give me time to actually get this review done, and so now it is time to do that. So thanks to Burson, you guys are great on that one. So any links that you see right here, they will not be affiliate links because I think you either buy these direct from Burson or you can get them from Geshelli Labs too if you buy one of their DACs that is compatible with these OpAmps, which is what I have right here. This is my Geshelli J2S 4499 variant, and that was the primary test bed that I used for these OpAmps. So what do I think of these? Are they worth an upgrade in a device like this? Let's find out right after shameless self-promotion.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
All right, key questions you're probably wanting answers to right away is, are these V7 OpAmps good? Yes, they are quite good. And they sound pretty fantastic. We'll get to that in a little bit here. So, I mean, if that's what you need to hear, there it is. They do sound a little bit different from each other. They sound a little bit different than other OpAmps I have experience with, and so they do carve out their own little unique slice of the market. We'll talk about that too as the review unfolds. A couple of things that I want to get out of the way before we get into the remainder of the review here. Question one you may have is, what is an operational amplifier, or OpAmp for short? And basically what they are is just little tiny voltage amplifiers. They take an incoming voltage, they increase its amplitude, you get more voltage out, all right, than came in. Like, that's the amplifier part of this. In audio circuits, well, really in electrical circuits period, there are usually three primary circuit elements that we use to increase voltage and thus increase power output. One of them is the OpAmp, the other is transistors, and then we also use vacuum tubes for that purpose. More and more audio gear has gone to using OpAmps to do amplification duties in something like the Geshelli J2S DAC. And there are other devices that do this, but in something like the Geshelli J2S DAC, where you have a delta sigma or a little microchip that does the digital to analog conversion, the voltage or the signal that comes off of that DAC chip is usually very, very low in level. All right, meaning that it does not have a lot of power coming out to it. Certainly not enough power to get to the 2 volts needed for a single-ended output or the 4 volts needed for a balanced analog output in here. So something like this, an OpAmp, is placed on the output stage of a DAC to take that signal from the DAC chip and increase its amplitude to the 2 or 4 volts needed for the output on a device like this. Okay, now there are amplifiers out there that do even more, like a lot of THX and topping amps, like those kind of amplifiers use OpAmps to basically just increase the power output, period. And you're driving your headphone or your speaker or whatever the case may be right off of an OpAmp output rather than a transistor or a vacuum tube output. Again, there are different approaches here to this way. But for those devices that use OpAmp output stages, okay, should you consider something like the V7 here? Let's get into that. So Why are the V7s special to begin with? Well, they are made differently than a lot of standard op amps. Now, I don't have a ton of op amps here in front of me. This little guy right here is a Texas Instruments OPA 1656. This is like the standard stock option, if you will, of op amp that Geshelli sells for their J2S DAC, okay? And you see it is rather tiny. It's got 8 pins on it, and it's got this tiny circuit board kind of like thing on top there, all right? And other op amps that are in existence, you don't even see the pins up here at the top. It's just like this black body kind of thing going on top of it. It's all an integrated unit in here. What the Bursons are doing from a, kind of a 1,000-foot view here is they are taking what is like often kind of an integrated circuit approach, okay, which again, this Texas Instruments here is not a completely good example of that. I just don't have any, but I can pop up a picture of a standard op amp on the screen to compare to. All right, and then what Burson has done is they have kind of made discrete what is often integrated in a lot of op amps in there. So what you see in here, and one of the reasons that these things carry the name dual, is because you basically have 2 tiny circuit boards in there that are doing, a lot of your electronic processing and so forth in there. And then you have this nice metal heatsink on the outside here, because once you go to a more discrete approach, you generate more heat generally than an integrated approach, and you got to get that heat to go somewhere, so thus we have this heat sinking thing. So these are made differently than most op amps to begin with, all right? So they do take up more space inside the unit. For compatibility, it's not just that they have to fit the 8-pin op amp slot on a circuit board. There has to be the physical space to accommodate something like this as compared to something, okay, more of, come on camera, focus, okay, but something more like this size, okay? So they're built differently. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of that because I will leave it to Burson's website, which I will link to down in the description, for you to read more about like the construction, why it's different, and that sort of thing. Some good information there. They do a pretty good job of explaining it, I think. So I will leave it to them to do the legwork from there. But that's really the key difference and all of that here. So, I mean, I just kind of showed you how they're built and that sort of thing. And I will tell you that they do get a little bit warm. These heat sinks on the outside get a little bit warm during operation, because there were a couple of times where I was listening for a while and I'm like, okay, time to switch. And then I would turn this unit off, the Geshelli off, unplug it to pull the circuit board out, and then go and grab one of these, and they were a little warm to the touch. Not hot, not finger burning levels or anything like that, but a little bit warm. So the heat sinking is there, it does work on that. And that's about it. Now, if you're worried about how to swap op amps on the Geshelli, that's in a different video, one of my reviews for this. I will link to that down below. From henceforth, let's dig into the sound of these Burson op amps here. Okay, so test gear. Obviously, the J2S right here, that was the primary test bed, and this has the 4499 AKM chip in it. Okay, so it's that variant, right? And I also use an aftermarket power supply, which was from Swagman, but I don't think that is sold anymore, unfortunately. So I won't link to that there, but I do use an aftermarket power supply on this, just as an FYI. Now, downstream from this thing here, I had a plethora of things, and I will just leave it to down in the description. I'll put a list of the things that I had in front of the Geshelli and then after the Geshelli to evaluate these. And then if I have reviews for those products, I will put the links to those reviews right next to them. Okay, but a big waving red flag here on this review that you should keep in mind is that this Geshelli right here is the only piece that I had on hand that I could swap out the op amps and do an evaluation of these things here. Most of the amplifiers and all that are my references, most of the DACs and the amplifiers and all of that I have around are not made to have swappable op amp slots, for one, or they are transistor or vacuum tube based. Okay, so this was the only thing that I had. Now, normally in my reviews, I like to use multiple pieces of gear to match with various products, just because I think you start to get a clearer picture of what the device under test is doing, and you can start to see if there are any red flags or anything to worry about in terms of it matching to other products and all of that. So just know that a limitation of my review is I could only use the Geshelli J2S to test these. This is a fine unit, so I don't think this really holds these back, so to say. I'm just saying that that is a limitation of this review that you must keep in mind. The Geshelli J2S is not the only device on Earth that these are compatible with, but it's the only one that I had to test with. Okay, moving on then. The sound on these varies. We'll start with perceived frequency response. To my ears, the vivids sound a little bit just slightly V-shaped, okay? So V for vivid, vivid for V, something like that, okay? And then the classics sound just a little bit treble in mid-range focus. So they're a little bit more just slightly leaner and brighter leaning, okay, than overall than the vivids are, okay? So let's dive into that a little bit more. Neither of these kind of 1,000-foot view of perceived frequency responses things are like really profound or like really pervasive in your face kind of thing. They're not too aggressive or overdone, but they are detectable. So to me, the bass and the treble on this one are a little bit more standout than the mids on here, which is why I say it comes across as just slightly V. Okay, now the tonal balance on these, meaning the relationships between the fundamental frequencies and the harmonics and all that, are pretty accurate and natural on these. It just seems like the mid-range range is just not quite as up front or forward as the bass and the treble on these. Okay, now these are very dynamic, okay, and hard hitting and fun. Like, they've got a lot of impact, particularly in the bass and in the sub bass, a lot of oomph in the low end. The sound is well textured. Okay, it is quite detailed. There's a lot of detail and clarity coming out of the sound from these guys here as well. But to me, it's not overdone, right? It doesn't sound like it's detail for detail's sake or just resolution for resolution's sake. It still sounds like it's in service to sounding natural, but the resolution and the detail retrieval and the overall clarity are standout features of the V7, the Vivid line there, as well as the dynamics. Lots of oomph to it in there in the low end, and then also like a fairly snappy mid-range and treble and that sort of thing going on with it too. Okay, the classics here to my ear, as I said, a little bit more mid and treble focused here. And to me, even more mid than treble focused, although that is there. Now, they do maintain a good chunk of the dynamics that the Vivids have, not quite as much. It's just not quite as, particularly in the bass, there's not quite as much oomph or rumble or slam or that sort of thing going on here with the classics, though through the mids and the treble, the attack on these is just slightly more aggressive than it is on the Vivids, I would say. So they sound just a touch snappier in there. So it's like a slightly quicker sound, if you will, than these. But I didn't find the clarity on these to be quite as high as these, even though the frequency response that I just described might indicate that they would be just a little bit clearer sounding. I didn't quite find that to be the case here on the classics. All right. They're about even, I would say, in terms of overall clarity. I'm just saying there's not really an advantage to these that you might expect given the frequency response description that I just gave. All right, both sets are excellent in holography, though. Like the three-dimensionality of the soundstage, and although I think the Vivids might be just a little bit bigger, a little bit wider in soundstage than the classics are, they both do an excellent job of being three-dimensional and holographic, placing instruments and sounds in the sound field well, putting a proper and natural sounding amount of space between them, and having it blend coherently with pans and stuff instead of sounding discretized or all that. And there's I didn't really detect things getting thrust at me so much, with one exception. The mid-range on the classics is forward enough that it does give just a hint of like vocals standing out from the rest of the soundstage a little bit. So if the rest of your soundstage is like back here, then vocals through the classics can be a little bit more up here. It's not a huge difference there, but to my ears, it was detectable. But I mean, we are talking kind of hair-splitting differences between the two here in terms of like three-dimensionality and holography and that sort of thing. Now, I do want to come back to perceived frequency response real quick here and make one more comment. The treble that I got from the classics to my ears sounded just a little bit thinner, lacked just a little bit of weight and body to it in comparison with the Vivids. I thought the treble on here, the tonal weight of it just sounded a little bit more fleshed out on the Vivids than the classics in there too. So that's another difference between the two that I want to point out here. Okay. Both sets, though, in totality sound very good. All right, like they are significant upgrades from something like, you know, a more basic Texas Instruments kind of op amp here. Like the step up from a TI like this to either of these on something like the Geshelli J2S here is quite significant. Right, there is a big performance advantage going from here to either of these on here and all of that. So if you're worried about like, are they worth $169 for a pair or $89 for a single? I mean, to my ears and in my estimation, yes, you get a substantial increase in sonics and overall performance going from a basic op amp like this to an upgraded op amp such as these. So in that sense, yeah, I think they definitely earn their stripes there. Okay, so then what about something like a Sparkos SS3602, which these sell for $79 US for a single and $158 US for a pair on there, so it's pretty close in price to the Bursons here, and this is another option that you can get from Geshelli's webpage as an upgrade to the J2S when you order that one. Okay, where these are V and these are a little bit more mid and treble focus, I think the Sparkos is a little bit more just like mid-range centric with slight tapers in both the sub bass and in the upper frequency. So it's not as extended in its frequency response, at least perceptually, than these two are. Okay, but there is a buttery smoothness to the mid-range on the Sparkos that neither of the Bursons have. So like all three options here, at least on the J2S, have like clear strengths in my estimation here. And that would be if you want a full, robust, active, but still very clear and very technical sound, Vivids. Okay, if you want a more vocal and treble-oriented listening experience that is still like technical, but like just has kind of this like, I hate this term is vague, I know, but just this musicality and like kind of almost like splendor to the vocals and that sort of thing. Okay, classics. But if you need a buttery smooth, like silky kind of mid-range and you're both a little bit treble sensitive and like not so much of a bass head, okay, Sparkos 3602s, okay, on that one there, at least again through the Geshelli. My personal ranking of preference here would be, at least on my setups with the J2S, I prefer the V7 Vivids most, then the Sparkos, then the V7 Classic, okay, on here. And let me tell you why. Because I am a little bit mid-range sensitive, right? I have a sensitivity somewhere between 1 and 3 kilohertz. Some of you will argue with that it's not actually a sensitivity and you'll just call it an intolerance, which whatever the combination is. Vocal timbre is a thing that I struggle with a lot with electronically reproduced music. it will start to sound shouty, honky, and hollow to me very quickly if there's not proper tonal balance through the mid-range in the 1 to 3 kilohertz range. Okay, to me, even though the entire mid-range region sounds a little bit recessed in comparison to the bass and the treble, the V7s here are still, just because of my little bit of sensitivity there, like I don't miss that. I don't really notice that recess other than to report it, say that it's there. It doesn't bother me at all, okay, in there. And I like the low-end fun that this gives me. I like the overall clarity. I like the soundstage, the holography, the detail retrieval, okay, and just, again, the fun, hard-hitting bass on it. Really like that. So these are going to be what lives in my J2S henceforth, all right, just because I like them a lot, all of that. Okay. The Sparkos comes next because of that mid-range sensitivity that I mentioned there. Okay, just really silky, buttery, smooth. Okay, it just doesn't quite have the bass or the treble extension that I like from these. It's not quite as dynamic or impactful in the low end as the Vivids are and all of that. But boy, just the mids like sound incredibly natural to me through the Sparkos here in a way that the other two don't to my ears. Then the classics, they do get a little bit shouty, honky, okay, to me, a little bit hollow in their mid-range timbre, just because that tonal balance is just a touch off to my ears, all right, and all that. And then like the weight of that treble thing, it just sounds just a tiny bit peaky in the treble to me as compared to these two. These two are smoother up top there, have more weight, more body to cymbal crashes, and that sort of thing, which my ears appreciate a little bit more. Now, that is my ears and my preferences speaking here. Technically, I do grant you that I think there is a slight advantage that both Bursons have over the Sparkos in terms of things like resolution, detail retrieval, three-dimensionality, overall holography, and the spatial presentation. I think these two are just a half tick ahead of the Sparkos there. They are very close, very, very close. These two just edge it out, though, in those categories there. If you are a person who wants your vocals to stand out a little bit, okay, or if you're a person who finds the 2K dip in headphones from like Hi-Fi Men or the Sennheiser HD 800 series, okay, if there's not enough 2K presence for you in the stock tunings of those headphones, then I think you are a candidate for the V7 Classics. Okay, I think that's who that will appeal to. Like that kind of preference is what this one will appeal to in there. So that's my take on that. But this is a Burson review, so let's get that Sparkos out of here. It bears repeating that the Burson V7 series op amps are very, very good. Okay, they are very, very good. They really are an upgrade over a standard stock basic op amp in there. They are excellent technically. They have excellent resolution, holography, detail retrieval, three-dimensionality. Okay, timbre. For me, the Vivids are better, but I think there are going to be some who really like the timbre on the classics out there too. Okay, but they are strong across the board, period. All right, then they have individual strengths from there. A little bit more mid-range and treble focus here that can like boost some of the perceived FR issues if you have gear that just isn't mid-forward enough for you. These can really help there. Really fun, hard-hitting bass on the V7 Pros, or excuse me, the Vivids. Okay, on there. So they've got that going for them too. So both excellent, both solid upgrades, noticeable upgrades over cheaper op amps, and they just give you each a little bit different sonic flavor. So pick the one that you want in that regard. So thanks again to Burson for sending these over. I enjoyed getting to know them, and I look forward to using them and having them around to check with other op amp based gear in the future, things that can be swapped out and all of that. So they're going to be handy to have around there. So that's cool. All right, so thanks to all of you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, leave, or check out my PayPal and my Patreon. Generally, do those things you do to support YouTube channels, and as always, enjoy the music.